G'day guys and welcome. My name is Michael and I am the DeadAussieGamer and welcome to this very special Let's Review. Now, guys, as many of you guys know, Pathfinder 2nd Edition has been out now for quite some time, and a lot has happened in that period of time, and we've just received a brand new book, the Advanced Player Guide, and, a lot of people out there are currently reviewing Pathfinder and the like, but today I am joined by my good friend DM Jared from Nothing Ventured, Nothing Gained, to talk not about just the APG, but to look at Pathfinder a year later and see where we're both at. Thank you so much, Jared, for coming and joining us today on this Let's Review Go.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Awesome. So first of all, of course, so that we kind of have an understanding of where your experience came from, what was your introduction to, let's say, Pathfinder in general, like Pathfinder First Edition?
Sure. Pathfinder First Edition, I was introduced to, in 2012?
Yeah.
It was very early. It was like right after they had come out with their first Advanced Player's Guide for the first edition.
Oh, so this is kind of almost like a mini anniversary kind of thing for you as well. It's like the APG celebratory thing. We should do something.
Yeah, totally. I'm so game. I love the. What's funny is, the Alchemist was what caught my eye to Pathfinder. The artwork in the Advanced Player's Guide, and they have the Alchemist as a core class now. So I was just excited to play this because my original character was an Alchemist.
Cool. Well, fantastic. I mean, look, I actually have a bit of history with the Alchemist myself. Well, first of all, I'm really hoping that the artwork or the iconic for the Alchemist in First Edition makes it into Pathfinder Second Edition somewhere, because they changed the iconic to the Goblin, because goblins are now playable race as well, which is fine. But I liked the half elf. He was cool. He was awesome. But I actually hated the Alchemist when I first looked at it. I saw many pages about how to use some bullshit, and I was just like, you know what? I can't even. But one of the things I do just as an exercise for myself as a player and as a GM, I look at stuff I hate, and then I force myself to play it so that I better understand it. And once I did that, I actually really had a great time. And now, like, every third or fourth character has to have a level or something of Alchemist, because it is such a fun and cool class. Yeah. So moving on from there, Second Edition. Now, what was your first impression when you came into Second Edition?
So my first impression was I actually played in the playtest. So that's technically my first impression of Second Edition. It was mixed. It was a mixed bag of nuts, but most playtests are mixed bag of nuts. I felt the casters were vastly underpowered compared to the marshals, and they needed to be tweaked. Then Second Edition finally dropped, and everything was very well balanced, especially through the 3-action system, which is almost revolutionary for a D20 system. It's the way I explain to players. It's, you ever watch a movie and the swashbuckling hero swings off the chandelier, and then drops in and then throws, some sword swings, and you play other D20 systems, and you have your standard action and then your movement.
Yeah.
So players all the time are like, oh, I want to jump over this balcony, slide down the rope, and then stab the bad guy. And you're like, well, you could do one of those actions on your turn. But now Pathfinder 2E allows you to do and play that fantasy out. And that's what I love about this system currently.
Awesome. I definitely approve, because for me it's cinematic. It's a cinematic role play, and that for me, as someone who loves movies and films and stuff like that, that's right up my alley. All right, so guys, this is why DM Jared is here, because Jared, you've been playing Second Edition pretty much since it's come out, at least in a regular game, in a regular space. I've had a very different experience. So as many of you guys know, big fan of Pathfinder for years and years and years. Back when I was doing Ask a Pathfinder instead of DeadAussieGamer, that was one thing I wanted to dedicate myself to, was talking about Pathfinder. When second edition came out and it wasn't backwards compatible, it was gut wrenching, because myself and so many other people had put in so much hours learning the system. We bought all the books and stuff like that, so there was definitely a rougher patch to begin with. Right, there was something you needed to overcome within yourself to even pick this book up. But I persevered because I had faith. I have faith in Paizo and what they did, because they made an amazing game once. I mean, of course, these are the people that would make Pathfinder Second Edition amazing as well. And they kind of led us into it through the Pathfinder Unchained and some of those rules. So I was already kind of familiar with some of the concepts. Like 3-action economy is actually in Pathfinder Unchained. Mm-hmm. So when you say it's revolutionary, yes, but it wasn't kind of just thrown in there as a, like, hey, by the way, they actually tested it out and tested a lot of stuff with both Pathfinder First Edition and Starfinder. A lot of the mechanics that they wanted to play with. Now, when I got to the playtest, I had a very different experience as well. It wasn't really a balancing issue, but they were trying out some really outlandish ideas. Like there was a something that they cut out, which was the what was it? It was like the item. There was like an action economy to use items. Everything had a charge, and eventually, basically, it meant that all martial combatants could effectively be Gishes. And having charisma as a main stat applied for everyone, because that's what you needed in order to wield magic items. The problem is that if you didn't have charisma, then, well, I mean, it even got to a point where I think it limited how many potions of healing you could drink. And there were lots of people who were just outraged at that for the playtest. And, Paizo did the thing. They sort of waved their flag and said, no, we're just testing these ideas because we know they're kind of, we're divided on it ourselves. And they lived to that expectation. And that was what I liked about Second Ed, is they didn't just do the playtest and said, hey, look at this cool thing, let's drum up some advertising. They legitimately took the feedback from the players. They interpreted the data and basically said, this is what we want to do. These are some of the suggestions. This is how we want to build and create this game. And they followed through. So that was really, really cool. The struggle I then had when I got to second edition was no one wanted to play it. And that was tough. And I had to stop and realize, why don't people want to play this? This is a great new game. It has the 3-action economy, which is really cool. There's so much versatility. Paizo, at least as far as I can tell so far, and this is, touch wood, has basically abandoned the notion of the 3.5 method of like, oh yes, let's build towards prestige classes and all that, and embraced the archetype, which is, I mean, again, one of the mainstays of Pathfinder. They've done this. Why aren't people interested? It's got all the stuff that we loved about Pathfinder First Edition. And the reason I found out was because, and so that you know as well, I run a lot of games for young kids and stuff like that, was because they felt like they just didn't have the options. Why play Second Edition when we can keep playing First Edition with a billion different options? And so, a year later, several adventures have come out now. A couple, like lots of the society games have also made way. But now we've got a big book that's shown up, and that is the Advanced Player's Guide. And that's what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about pretty much what's happened in that year. We want to talk about the APG, and just chill with a cool dude. All right. So
yeah.
Two very different perspectives, guys, coming at you as we chop this discussion down. So, Jared, first of all, a question for you. My experience with the whole thing in regards to why people play Pathfinder and why people sort of moved over to second edition. Was that similar with your experience as well? Like, did you find that people were hesitant to?
Yes. So I'm a huge Pathfinder nerd, right? So loved Pathfinder, big fan of it.
All right, in which case I've got another follow-up question just to interrupt you here. Yeah. What is your favorite Pathfinder faction? Not society faction, but like faction.
Faction?
Yeah. See how Pathfinder nerdy is, we'll just find out.
I'm going to say, so I'm a big fan of Judge Dredd, right?
Yeah.
So I love the Hell Knights. I think I think they're interesting, and if you want to play a Hell Knight, there are options now.
Do you have a
And
favorite order?
the
See, I'm
the order
stretching
I
him
like the
now.
most, the order I like the most is no longer around, quote unquote. They were the Monster Hunters.
Oh, the
Uh,
Order of the Pike.
that Pike, yeah, they're
Yeah,
all gone.
yeah, yeah.
So
It's a bit sad.
whenever I play, I talk to my DM and I'm like, hey, I want to play a Hell Knight from the Order of the Pike, but they're all gone. And he's like, so how do you have them? And I was like, oh, like the typical, there was a Hell Knight and he was in my town and he was dying and he trained me or whatever.
Mm.
And he gave me the test and my character passed the test.
Uh,
So most of the time the
mm.
DM's cool with that. I've played with a few who are like, no.
Yeah, no, I
And
love
that's
that.
fine.
I admit my favorite is also the Hell Knights. Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of Order of the Chain.
Yeah.
Everything has its place, and it needs to be in that place.
Mm-hmm.
Stretches like they're normally prison keepers and wardens and stuff like that, but you can bring that to quite a wide variety of games. Like especially if it's like cool, this person has deposed the king, and you're there going no no no, we're putting the king right back where he came from. And
Mm-hmm.
you could really start some really cool adventures based on that. So,
Oh,
so
definitely.
awesome, awesome. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Carry on. We
No,
were
no.
talking about your big
Experience getting.
Pathfinder nerd,
Yeah.
and your first foray into the hesitation in second
Yeah.
ed.
So I'm lucky enough. I'm blessed to live in New York, and we have cons all the time. Except for now this year, right? But so there was a con on the island, and it's called Long Island LI RetroCon, right? And my friend was like, "Hey, listen, would you want to run a fifth edition, module?" And there was just so many fifth edition modules, right? And I was like, you know what? This was like at the playtest time, uh, and it was like getting real close to the core rulebook coming out. So like they kind of finalized the playtest rules,
Mm.
and I was like, "Do you mind if I run Pathfinder Second Edition?" And he was like, "Yeah, I know Pathfinder, right? Like most people know Pathfinder if you're in the community."
Mhm.
She's like, "Yeah, sure, do whatever." So my first game, I just had a bunch of old school Pathfinder players sit down, like 6 old school Pathfinders, and none of them, they were all there specifically to rag on how bad this game was. They wanted to play
Oh,
it and leave the table knowing they were like 100% right in their belief of this is going to be a terrible system.
I
So
can I can also imagine them coming in Reservoir Dogs style, like you're sitting there at the table, everything's playing out, and then there's just this slow motion '60s music as they're walking through all these nerds, potato chips in their mouth, as they like pull open the seats and sit down with like this huge swafting jacket and like sunglasses. They take it off, put it down, grab their bag of dice, throw it down,
mhm,
and just look you straight in the eye and say, "You're shit, mate."
it was very much like that. They sat down and they were 100% honest about how they wanted to hate the system. They were like, "Oh, we're just here to like basically self-review the game and know how bad it is." And it was an actual group that was playing Pathfinder, and they were like, "Yeah, we want to know how bad it is, so no one wants to convert." So I was like, "Okay." So we sat down and I ran them through the playtest module, that the one where you fight all the demons, the TPK one.
Oh
That's
yeah, yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
It became known as the TPK one because it got incredibly harder and harder. So in my head, I was like, okay, these guys are old school gamers. They're gonna want to play this very hard scenario and just be challenged. And we sat there and just ran it. Um, we had 3 hours to run the whole thing. They left smiling and they were like, you know what? We had reservations and we loved playing this. It was the 3 action system. We had the iconics. So we had a Miri, we had uh, the Rogue,
Maurizio,
Valeros, yeah, Emitrio,
go and say it.
Valero, and uh,
Ezra.
Seoni, Ezrin, yeah,
Yeah.
and Fumbus. Someone played Fumbus.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and they left smiling. They kept the character sheets. They were like, "Oh, you want these back?" And I was like, "No." And they were like, "No, we want to play it." I, TPK'd them,
Hmm.
and they had a blast. And that was my. I felt like it was like like the Blues Brothers. It was my mission from God to tell people how awesome this game was, and to convince and convert the masses.
So if anyone from Paizo is watching this right now, right, just pointing this out there, right, DM Jared, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Definitely could use some sponsorship. Show them some love, just saying, putting it out there. No, that's cool, man. It sounds like you came across one of the hardest things a GM has. In fact, any performer, right? Let's talk about this for a second. There is a culture around, especially stand-up comedy, where you succeed because your audience comes in specifically to have a good time, to have fun, to just enjoy themselves, right? But if someone comes in with the intention to brag on shit, to take the piss, or to not have fun, it's a whole new world. It's a whole new ball game, and you need to pull out all the stops to drag things back from that point, right? It sounds like you came across the D&D equivalent, or the RPG equivalent of that situation, where these guys weren't here to have fun. They were here to basically just confirm their already intense bias, and you converted them. Not necessarily converted them to join the game completely, but you made sure that they realized that, hey, you can actually have fun with this. So that's harder, in my opinion, than finding a bunch of brand new people who have never done role-playing games before and showing them a complicated system, and sort of them going, oh, I'm a bit confused. This is harder. Yeah. This is way harder. And, that's cool, man.
Thank you. Truthfully, it was how streamlined the rules was. And the one thing it always sticks out in my head, the one thing the guy said was, yeah, the grappling rules are amazing. Because he was like, I remember grappling in, 3.5, you had to have a 3.75, you had to have your scroll of
the flow chart.
Your flow chart of, okay, did they do this? And I remember it was Valeros grabbed the demon, and he was like, okay, so I'm going to start my grapple. How many actions is that? I was like, oh, it's an action. He was like, so what do I do? I was like, you just roll your die, and I check the DC, and then we keep it moving. And he was like, really? I was like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so. No, I agree. I as someone who loves cinematic combat, grapple is always one of those ones that I try to keep memorized just because of how difficult it used to be. But yeah, Pathfinder and Pathfinder 2e, both actually, one of the big sells for me was just how easy it was to do things that weren't just smack it with a sword, because everything else is too hard. So I quite enjoyed that. My experience when with some of these difficulties. So I run games out of my local youth center here in Australia, and I rotate games pretty regularly. Every now and then I'll have a short form game which will run for maybe 3-4 months, and then swap to a different game or a different system. And I've got one super long game that I'll usually run for like a couple years. And the kids love it. The kids love the format, and they like, pretty much at the end, what we do is we have a copy of the actual book, and we have all the kids sign it with their characters. And we've done Rise of the Rune Lords, we've done Skull and Shackles, and they've got all the. We even had one kid, and sorry, I'm just gonna brag about this.
No, it's okay.
I'm so proud of my kids. One of my kids actually doesn't touch paper, right? Like there's something about it. Hates it. And in that moment, we got everyone to sign their characters for Skulls and Shackles. He was really, really, sort of like, no, I don't really want to sign my name, but I really want to sign my name and stuff. And I said, well, listen, look, you can have someone else sign it. That's not a problem. But if you do, you'll always know at the back of your mind that wasn't your signature there. And he actually did. He actually came up and he actually wrote his signature on it, and it was such an awesome moment. So, anyway, sorry. Like I said, that was off. That was completely off tangent, but it was such a wonderful moment. I love sharing that one. Anyway, so we got to the end of Skull and Shackles, and we were like, hey, Pathfinder 2nd Edition's just come out. There's the Age of Ashes adventure that's come out. Let's maybe try doing a run of this. And almost unanimously, they all just said, no, we don't want to do this. And I said, okay, well, what if during the holidays I run a Pathfinder one-shot? And I ran Fall of the Plague Stone, which was the first kind of singular module that came out, just to kind of warm them up to it. We did the character creation session, which we do off to the side, and it was I wouldn't say nightmarish, but like the kids were of the mindset that they didn't want to learn how to play this game. And so, they were being that super extra. I can't read what's in front of my face, and
Yeah.
so trying to deal with like 12 kids, because my usual group is about 12 kids, right?
Hmm.
Trying to deal with my usual group, trying to get them to do that. And this is not a standard, by the way. I want to say this. This is not a standard for Pathfinder. It's just
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about with the whole like, yeah. Sometimes if you've got that mental block where it's I don't want to play this, and that's
Hmm.
literally all it's going to come down to. It's Jared was just more successful than I was. I just couldn't wrangle him, and now we're playing Hell's Rebels, which still fun, but
I like Hell's Rebels.
Hell's Rebels is great, and I do
Yep.
intend to run Hell's Vengeance once they're
Ooh.
through it. And now that we've got the Hell Knights as well, I'm very tempted to see if I can squeeze in second edition again. Anyway, the yeah, so that was pretty much why Pathfinder got a pushback from me.
Mhm.
Now, Jared, let's go to the next little phase
Yeah.
of this and talk about basically in the time since the first release, because we're talking about that now. In the
Yeah.
time since the first release, what are some of the, I guess, biggest strengths that you could see in Pathfinder Second Edition, for players who may not necessarily have, because let's talk about people who aren't from the Pathfinder legacy group, people who
Mhm.
haven't played Pathfinder before, may have played D&D or other role playing games. What are some of the strengths that you would highlight about Second Ed now
Hmm.
compared to obviously
Yeah.
the first release?
So one of the strengths I firmly believe in is me personally. I like making terribly weird characters. So the dwarf bard, the the elf, barbarian, right? So very weird characters. The way they've created character development, you can make those characters and they can be efficient. They're not going to be the min max guy, right? They're not going to be pumping out crazy high numbers because of the negatives that you start with, but you can still have great characters that are so crazy. And I think that's one of its greatest strengths. And I know that's something people said about the first, but I really feel they've tuned that and honed it into something so easy. And like you said, you were talking about character creation, with the little ones, with the youths, and they were struggling, right? And then it was half and half. It is a new system, and it's a mental block. I don't really want to do this.
Yeah.
I understand that, so I remember being in school, being like, I don't want to do this paper, and no matter how easy the paper was, I'm
Yeah.
not doing it. It's
Oh
too
yeah,
hard.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what? And on that kind of note as well, this is where I see the Starfinder influence coming in, where in previous editions you rolled for hit points, you rolled for skill points, you did this, you did that. Everything in second edition is now based on like proficiencies and things locking in as you progress and being very standardized. That was from Starfinder as well, because Starfinder have like, cool, this is the race hit points, this is the class hit points, you add them at level 1 plus your con, and then as you level up, you increase that further based on the class that you have, and it's all very static. You don't roll for hit points anymore, you don't, and when you've got your skill points, you don't no longer sit there and go, oh, I'll put a rank here, and I'll put a rank here, and I'll put a rank here. It's now just, cool, what are you trained in, what are you skilled in? So it's actually, as you said earlier, way more streamlined, way more easier, way more easier. That's such bad English, even for an Australian. Way easier,
There you go.
as you kind of approach it as a system. So yeah, I think I agree. I think for new people, that is definitely one of the big stays. What would you say one of the biggest, I suppose, hurdles or obstacles with this system for new players? What do you reckon that would be?
Um, the conditions. I
Yeah.
hate saying it. I love the fact that there are tons of conditions, right? There are tons of conditions,
Hmm.
and that is a hurdle for any new DM. It's a hurdle for any new player, and sometimes it's a simple word description that will confuse players. So sometimes something will say, "Oh, you take a status penalty," and sometimes it'll just say, "You get a -2." So do you add the status penalty? Do you get the -2? And I think that is a hard problem for new players coming in. It's just memorizing all these little rules that can bog down your
Yeah.
game, because now you're opening your core rule book, flipping. Okay, looking this rule up. Other systems have conditions, but they've kind of streamlined them in a little bit.
Yeah, no,
I
I can
think
see.
that's the
Yeah, fair.
yeah.
I mean, and on that note as well, for those of you who are who may not be aware, there is actually also a deck of Pathfinder condition cards, which are,
Mhm.
of course, any valuable tool for the game. I remember I was at Gen Con last year. It was actually my first Gen Con ever
Oh,
last year, and my actual first trip to America, full stop, last year. And
wow.
yeah, it was such an experience, so wonderful, and I was so grateful to meet so many awesome people. But when
Hmm.
I went to the Pathfinder booth, because that was my goal, it's like the only thing I'm doing when I go to America is I'm going to that Pathfinder booth, and I'm picking up and holding in my hand, clutching it, is a copy of Second Edition. That was the only thing I said. And as soon as I saw the condition cards on the table, I was like, I'm gonna need that. I just
Hmm.
straight up, I am going to need that, because the first edition condition cards were just amazingly useful. Again, working with kids, it's like, cool, you're sickened. Bam! There you go. It's all on the card. It's like, oh, what do I add to my rolls for this? Like, bam, it's on the card. Stop asking me, because I don't know. Just read the card. Just read the card, man. And yeah, it's good. It's super helpful. I would say, from my perspective, and you
Yeah.
feel free to comment on these, by the way, because I appreciate that your candor as an interview guest. But this is a discussion. You can rebuff what I say. I feel as the greatest con of Pathfinder Second Edition is the learning curve when you first start out. The book itself, for me, right? Like, you can make a character pretty easy. But to understand and interpret the character, as well as to prepare yourself to be able to GM, requires a great deal of reading. This is really in essence to the fact that there is just so many options that are available at such an early level. You've got your skill feat, you've got your ancestry feat, you've got your class feat, you've got your general feat, you've got, all the different ways that these feats then interact and the different combinations that they then present. You've then got, as you level up, that further explanation to it. And it keeps just growing and growing and growing. It's like, okay, cool. Do I get a skill feat this level, or do I get a general feat? Is that a general feat or a skill feat? When do I get those ancestry feats again? And they're all part of that progression that just ducks and dips and dives from all these different kind of pools, I guess, of feats. And I think it takes a while to understand how they interact with the world and the game itself. So that's experience, really. And then for a GM, you have to then be able to understand how that interprets to the beasts and monsters and creatures within your world, as well as the hazards and how all this interacts. Like, for example, like, cool, you're traveling up a mountain. What are the basic rules for climbing? And if there's climbing rules, how do they interact with the feats and
Hmm.
abilities associated with climbing? How does that affect the move speed of creatures who have less than this particular move speed? And like, eventually, I think that level, once you get over that cliff, right, and you realize that, hey, a lot of this stuff is kind of interchangeable, right? You kind of see the pattern in the rules, as it were.
Yeah.
It's fine, right? But that initial from zero to where that is, I reckon, is a very steep climb and requires quite a lot of reading and quite a lot of prep compared to a lot of other
Other.
games that are out there at the
Yeah.
moment.
I have to agree with you. I wish I could rebut you on that, but you're very much in the right. I find myself normally when prepping for other systems about 2 hours.
Hmm,
Depending on the system and what's happening, give or
sure.
take 2 hours. Uh, Second edition Pathfinder, I'm looking at about 3.5 hours, especially if I'm converting an older module or I'm trying to do something interesting, like they're fighting on a cliffside against harpies. Well, how does combat work? How does spell combat work? How does can you fire into? Is it a windy day? Because that also comes into effect. Conditions based on elements. Um, do any of my players have quick climb or mounted combat or any the vast variety, like you said, of options
Mm.
And now as a DM, depending on your party size, mine is fairly large, 6 players. I have to go get their character sheet, look at all their feats, double cross-reference that to what's happening in my game, and then take that into account. And I'm not a math guy. Sadly, I'm very poor in math, not my best skill, and now I'm adding all these negatives and minuses, and I try to do it for my players, so when they sit down to the game, I could tell them, like, okay, you're going to be rolling with a -2.
Mm.
You're going to be rolling with a -1. Um, that hinders a lot as a DM, and you're right, like it is a steep climb, and I'm still learning the rules even a year into it. And like we're talking about, the APG just came out. There are new races in that all come with really cool abilities, but now those abilities, how do they affect with
Yeah, absolutely.
old
Because
rules?
as a GM, like you were just saying, you need to not only just be able to arbitrate the rules, but you also need to be able to interpret them as well. If your players misunderstand, and I say misunderstand, but if you're watching this, my kids who are watching this, you know who you are. Anyway, some people don't misunderstand the rules; they misunderstand the rules,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Big wink.
Yeah, you know who you are. Anyway, you get to the point where as a GM, you need to be able to know how those rules work, to go, oh, okay, cool, that's how that works, and stuff like that. And if you've got tables, multiple tables or big tables, it gets very difficult, especially when you release, more and more content. So yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that's part of the GM's responsibility, is to be able to interpret the rules for the player. I mean, sure, maybe not necessarily always having to do the maths for them, but being able to present them with cool, with all factors in mind, you get a -6 on your roll. That is including, of course, your positives and the negatives applied to the situation.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to arbitrate that, and yeah, that requires a good understanding of the game. Um, Awesome. Now we mentioned the APG. Let's talk the APG. Now, look, for me, I think one of the big things that stopped, at least, my players from getting into Pathfinder Second Edition was the lack of options, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, like I said, and I say lack of options with a grain of salt, because there are tons and tons and tons of options, right? But when
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at it on the broad spectrum, um, you know, there are less options than in a game that's been run for 13 years. Okay, so there's
Oh yeah.
there's not even, it's not a contest, it's not like a thing. It's just a case of, well, no, logically, yes, this game has been out for about a year. That game's been out, I mean, if you include all the 3.5 stuff, for almost 20 years now, right?
Give or
Uh
take, yeah.
yeah, right. So it's kind of like it's a no contest thing.
Yeah.
So people are going, well, I want to make an oracle, but we don't have an oracle, or I want to make a witch, but we don't have a witch. That has changed now.
Mm-hmm.
We now have the APG, which has provided a ton of new options. So let's talk the APG. What
Sure.
are your impressions of this new book that's come out?
2 things. One, I love it. Love the options. Love the new classes. Two, more rules for me to learn now. Um, and I'm not mad. I'll never be mad for more. Um, just sometimes I felt like I had a nice grasp of everything, and now they're like, "Here's some more," and I'm like, "No." Um, but truthfully, the APG has brought in um, some amazing options like the versatile heritage. I love that concept.
Walk us
Where
through it.
Sure, so they kind of did it in second edition with half orc and half elf. Basically, these are called versatile heritages, where you can kind of put them onto anything. So a half orc, in our heads, most of the time we learned half orc was half human, half orc, right? Or half elf was half elf and half human. Pathfinder 2E said, no, 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 no. You could be a half orc who is also half elf. Like you could be, your mom's an elf and your dad's an orc, and now you're a half orc because you know. Um, so they expanded that with Tiefling, Asimar, Dampier,
Dampier,
and
the Dusk
yeah,
Walkers,
Duskwalker. Yeah,
and was there another one?
I think that was it. I'm pretty sure that was it. And those basically now, if you're an Asimar, you can be an elf Asimar. You could be a dwarf tiefling, which is radical, right? Like no one ever puts those together. You have tiefling in your head. It's usually something like Hellboy, right? Like Hellboy's my favorite tiefling. I know people don't count him as a tiefling, but he's a tiefling. Come
I
on.
feel like he's just a fiend at that point. I mean, he's not really.
Eh,
Yeah, he's the
yeah, but he wants to
halfness.
be human.
He,
He's got a good heart.
That's true. That's true. I guess. Yeah. No. Look, I think that's great too. I definitely love the fact that they lent into the Duskwalker, because I know that they released the Duskwalker in Pathfinder First Edition very, very late. I feel like it was one of the last of the races to go through, and it was kind of like a tiefling and Aasimar vibe, but from the Boneyard. And I've always, I mean, DeadAussieGamer. I love my necromancy and the afterlife and stuff like that. I've always been a big fan of the style. So yeah, the Dustwalkers were very, very cool. And my only regret is I never really got a chance to really lean into them. But the fact that they're in so early in this is a great idea. It's fantastic. So yeah, I think in addition to that, we've now got, of course, I want to say 4 new classes, which are, of course, the Investigator, the Oracle, the Swashbuckler, and the Witch. We also see the return of a bunch of different classes from First Edition, which have been repurposed into archetypes, such as the Cavalier, the Vigilante, and that's the only 2 that's sticking out of my head at the moment.
The Cavalier, the Vigilante were classes.
Was there another one? I feel like there might have been.
Oh, Horizon Walker.
Yeah. Oh, yes. A lot of the prestige classes.
Yes.
Yes, and a lot of the prestige classes also have made their way into this book through as archetypes. Now, I want to talk about that in specific.
Sure.
What is your impression of these classes, or that these things that were classes now being repurposed as archetypes? What's your thought on these?
So I'm going to have to be the Nancy negative over here, the Debbie Downer, and say I was a huge fan of Cavalier. I played the Cavalier. I loved the iconic. I loved his relationship with his horse. Even I played a samurai in a Eastern game once. I was a Ronin, because who doesn't want to be a Ronin? And I kind of wish it was a class. I really wish it was a class. The Vigilante, I think, fits well with being a dedication, because it was always a super weird class, and I never really wrapped my head around it very well. I was like, there's just too many options in a game that had tons of options, and now I have to build 2 separate characters, which is awesome, right?
But, yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I love the Vigilante. I think people underappreciated the Vigilante, and I'll tell you why. One of my characters explains perfectly how versatile the Vigilante could be. A lot of people went straight for, like, a Vigilante as a Vigilante. And I know that sounds pretty logistic. It's like, yeah, cool. You put on a mask, you go up, you beat people, and you say, I'm Batman, right? Yeah. What I did was I had a character who was a Hell Knight infiltrator. And my social form was that of a hero, like an adventurer and stuff like that. And whenever he put on his mask, it was like him pulling out his badge and saying, freeze, I'm a Hell Knight. And that was how I used it. So he would ambush people by revealing that he was actually a member of law enforcement. And that's how I played my Vigilante. Yeah. And there's just so many ways to kind of play that dual identity thing without necessarily leaning into the superhero kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I agree. There were so many options that, for this thing, because there was an option pretty much for you to be a member of almost every single class within this class. Now it's just more focused on the whole, vigilante, like the actual bit of the Vigilante that mattered, which was the concealing your identity. And that's really all you needed to add to all the other classes rather than adding all the classes to that
On
one
top-
skill set.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I agree. I think that was a very strong move. So for me, I've always been a big fan of prestige classes since the ye old days of 3.5. And the reason being is I loved the idea that when you were building your characters, you weren't just building something min-maxed, right? You weren't just sort of trying to boost up your numbers. In 3.5, you were building towards a goal, and that goal was a prestige class. Something very, very specialized, but if you hit it, you became a freaking master of that speciality. If you were a mystic theurge, for example, you were borderline a master of all magics of, the divine and the arcane and stuff. If you were, even if you were an archmage, it's like, yeah, cool, you've got like all the different spells that you at your disposal.
Yeah.
And I think by the end of it, you could even cast up to level 8 spells, which is like one short of like the god tier spells on multiple lists of spellcasting. That was how powerful they were. In Pathfinder First Edition, they kind of got toned back. They kept a lot of the legacy ones, like from the core rulebook, like the assassin, who is now an archetype, and a few of the other ones. And then they released their own series. But the series really kind of paled in comparison to the capstone powers or the level 20 powers that you would get if you just stayed in one class. So I mean, if thinking about that, looking at them applying it to an archetype rather than a full-blown prestige class, I don't mind that. There's still a level of building that goes into it, and you don't miss out on that big capstone ability either. You don't have to choose to sacrifice playing and getting your cool abilities for your class because you want to pursue a prestige class.
Yeah.
And I like that element. I like the fact that they've decided to lean into something that something that is, I wouldn't say iconic to it, but something that is integral to the Pathfinder system in the form of archetypes.
Yes, I agree with that. I remember a few of my players wanting to go do like different prestige classes, like Dragon Disciple. That's another prestige class from Pathfinder First Edition, and
that was from 3.5. At least. It might be earlier.
It kept and I remember they couldn't understand why they felt weaker. Instead of saying one class, they were like, why am I not so epic? And I was like, well, it's prestige class. You're kind of shaving a little bit off the top to do a little bit more. And now that same player, who's a good friend of mine, was still playing. He's been texting me all week about making a Cobalt Dragon Disciple. And I as much as I want to be
Is it going to call
excited
Deacon?
For him. Excuse me?
Is it going to be called Deacon?
No, sorry.
That's an old man joke there for you. Anyone who understands the reference, yes, definitely someone very, very into Baldur's Gate back in the day. Yes. No. No. I love the Dragon Disciple as well. I mean, you know what? And again, this is just a casual chat. It was supposed to only go for like 15, 20 minutes, and now we're clocking in 40 minutes. We're just going to turn to the hour. That's what we're going to do. We'll just turn this to an hour. Because this is fun. I like this. So I was a very, very big fan of the Assassin from 3.5. Now, for those of you who played the Assassin from 3.5, it was actually a spellcaster. It was a partial spellcaster, and it not only had really cool abilities to instantly slay people, but it had some badass assassin-only spells. You could literally tattoo yourself with your weapon. It's not concealed, it's just gone, and you could rip out your tattoo, and it's now in your hand. You even had an ability that would literally just go, Kali Ma, and rip out some dude's heart. There were just tons of these powers and abilities. And in Pathfinder First Edition, you looked at it and it was like there's no spells on them. And you have like that, I observe you for 3 rounds. 3 whole rounds I'm watching you and staring at you. It's like, hey, is that guy looking at me weird? It's like, yeah, he's looking at me weird. You should go punch him in the face. No, no, no. Give me another 12 seconds. All right? Then I can instantly kill you. And it was very lackluster. It was something you couldn't use in combat effectively, because combats don't usually last 3 rounds. And if they do, believe me, with the amount of hit points they've got, their fort save will succeed, right, against your
Yeah,
death attack. That's
it
that
just
is it was the magic of the balancing science. And then they released the Red Mantis Assassin, which had spells, and then it was actually kind of cool.
mhm.
And then when I'm looking at it now, I'm like, yeah, actually, you know what? This is what I wanted from in the first place. I wanted something that was just a part of my rogue or part of my character, that I could just be this guy who specialized in those assassinating skills, but through like little powers, not by like shifting and losing out on so much stuff
Mhm.
to get those things. So no, I think the APG has offered a bunch of new ways to deal with prestige classes and to touch in to those elements of the game that may not have been accessible in first edition. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think they've given themselves room to make prestige classes or dedications for games that like APs that they will be coming out with. They could say, oh, if you're playing in this AP, like like in Hell's Rebels, the Gray Maidens.
Hmm.
Um, I could see them coming out with like a situation where they would have, oh, if you're playing in this AP, you could be a Gray Maiden. Um, and it's just a dedication. So you might have that one
Absolutely.
character who's maybe a fighter, and now they feel, wow, I could take this and I could be a Gray Maiden, which is part of the story, which I think is really interesting,
Hmm.
um, and gives Paizo a lot of area to like build into.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. And I hope that they do, in fact, at some point or another, release kind of like a faction guide or faction book that actually does cover specifically things that go into dedications of various factions, like the Grey Maidens, the Red Mantis Assassins, the Hell
Yep.
Knights, etc., etc., etc. Because I think that's another one of the big iconic things of Pathfinder are these particular factions, how they interact with it. I mean, even the name Pathfinder is all about the Pathfinder Society and how they play into the world. So yeah, no, I completely agree.
Cool.
Now I guess the last topic that I wanna talk about with you in particular
Sure.
is I guess let's talk building an adventure from scratch, right?
Hmm.
Because I mean, we've talked about the APG and how we've got now a bunch more character options and stuff like that. We looked at all the stuff from really early on in like from the playtest to the release and stuff like that. Now we're going to be looking at the future, right?
Hmm.
Let's say that you are coming into Pathfinder Second Edition and you want to be building your own campaign. You want to be building your own new set of stuff. We now have, I believe, 2 bestiaries with a third on the
Hmm.
way. We now have obviously the core rulebook, the GM's guide, Inner Sea Gods, all of these like big
Yeah.
chunky books now since the release, right? Um, how much versatility? How much like as far as your GM toolbox? How well kitted are you? Do you think to building and creating your own custom adventure, the non-pre-written stuff?
Yes. So I feel you have a lot to build on. Don't get me wrong, there's tons of stuff in all of these things. They I think it goes back to how well you understand the rules. As we spoke earlier, you have this kind of learning curve of the rules. And let's say you feel you had a good grasp of that. Sure. And now you have all these books. What are you going to do with them? Well, you have the monster manual, which is amazing, because monsters don't act like players. So monster will have an attack. Let's say it has a tentacle. It'll just say if it hits, grab. Boom. Characters grab. Doesn't matter. They don't get a save. Grabs them. The octopus grabs your enemy. So that makes it easier for you as a GM. You don't have to worry about adding all these numbers. It just happens. Secondly, you one of the features that doesn't get looked at, and I feel is so important is exploration mode, and they did a lot with it in the GM guide, talking about, okay, you have that rogue, like we were just talking about the assassin, right? So you
Mhm.
have this rogue, and they want to be that assassin, so they want to scout ahead of the party and figure out there are rules for that, how to play that single player scouting mode, and that's amazing. Um, Besides that, you have all these extra books. This is gonna sound rude. They have so much time and many years of lore, and I feel like if you're homebrewing in Golarion, you have so much lore to build on, and it seems overwhelming, right? You don't
Versus
know.
obviously making your own world and stuff like that.
Yeah,
You know what? I will chime in on that one. I will chime in
yeah.
on that one. Now, I'm a big fan of the Galarian lore, but I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
Hmm.
And I'm going to say this. A lot of Galarian's lore, I feel, leans on real world history and real world culture. Taken from, like, for example, Assyrian culture is just Egyptian culture.
Yeah,
Slavic culture is literally Slav
yeah.
culture. The land of the Linum Kings is Norse and sort of Viking mythos. So the
Hmm.
question is, what is cool? Is it Galarian or is it our wonderful and amazing world that we already live in?
I I kind of agree. I never thought of it like that. You just kind of blew my mind a little bit. I don't know if you caught that on stream, but
A little bit.
I uh I had my mind blown a little bit. I never thought of it like that, and I think it's probably because we have such a fantastical world, and a lot of times we miss it because we're caught up in the everyday, and it takes a moment like this for someone to say, "Hey, you do know we've lived in that. We have that history here. It might not be pretty, but what history is pretty, right? If you read
Exactly.
Galarian lore, it's
No,
not pretty. You have
absolutely.
Cheliacs, um, halflings. Most people are like, "Oh, halflings are these cute, lovable people." Not in Galarian.
No,
They
and then
were.
you've got the whole slavery trade and the Bellflower Network and the
Mm-hmm.
temples of Milani and stuff like that, which of course I mean you could find just tons of places in history. I won't name any
Yeah.
on stream, but you could name just a ton of them that could lean into the rise of evil empires and the fall of evil empires like
Mm-hmm.
the Rune Lords themselves.
Yep.
You could even look at the atheists from Rahadum, for
Yeah.
example,
They're
and
really
how
cool.
like I said, there's just so many different cultural pieces that you can see reflected in our society. I'm not saying, and I want to say this explicitly. I'm not saying that there isn't an element of creativity that goes into the Pathfinder world. There's
Oh,
so much. It's such a creative and vibrant world and stuff like that. But I would not necessarily say you would be doing yourself a disservice if you were to play in a homebrew world. I would say that, however, learn from
mm-hmm.
Galarian. Learn from what it is. If you find out that Galarian, for example, I was running Strange Aeons, which is a
Oh,
Lovecraft adventure set
yeah.
in Thrushmoor, right? I can take that and just put that quite literally smack dab in the middle of Europe somewhere, because
Mm-hmm.
it is in a nutshell a story influenced by the Tales of Innsmouth. So I could
Yep.
take them directly to Innsmouth, and or my own custom world simply based on that. That
Mm-hmm.
Paizo and Pathfinder have made it so that it is very easy to be able to understand the genre, the vibe, the culture that you're going to be in because it has such strong ties. And I think that's
Yeah.
my thoughts on the homebrew thing.
No, no. I'm actually currently homebrewing. Did you ever see the TV show Thundar the Barbarian?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm homebrewing a campaign for a few of my friends that takes place in Thundar the Barbarian's universe. Based completely on Pathfinder 2e. Uh
That sounds amazing.
it's and and you have the Numeria, which has androids and such,
Yep.
and it fits perfectly in this, and it's like that magic technology mix. So you could have an android and you can have uh thinking computers that
Hmm.
are also wizards.
Yeah.
Why not? They already
Absolutely.
have them in Pathfinder. I think one of the new gods is an actual AI. So
Oh yeah.
it,
It wasn't Bryn. It was someone else, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think she just it was, and that's touching back on the Pathfinder stuff. I love how Pathfinder 2E is a continuation of the complete lore of first edition. So if you played in any of their society games, that stuff happened, and when Pat Paizo tracks it, right? So it's all tracked.
Mm.
Um, they know how many times your characters helped these certain groups, and they know how many times these characters didn't help this group. So that carried over, and it's affected the world. And I think that's really cool. Like the main lich guy is now free. He's like running around free, and I was like,
Spoilers.
"Excuse me."
I said spoilers.
Oh, nah, don't worry about it.
That's
They'll
fine.
they'll figure it out.
Yeah. For
Literally,
the,
if you open up what was it, the Lost Omen Legends that just came out.
Mhm.
I think he's like right on the cover doing like some shady stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It is, it is. I'm just teasing because again, I play Pathfinder First Edition. One of the games that
Mm-hmm.
I haven't yet had the pleasure of playing, but very much would like to, is the Tyrant Grasp adventure, which was
Yeah,
the last adventure they made for Pathfinder First
first edition.
Edition. It was
Yep.
such like from what I have run and from what I've read, it is such an epic adventure. And if you are intending to move from First Edition to Second Edition, give it a play. It is really really cool. But
Mm-hmm.
yes, I digress. The
Sorry.
the continuation of lore, the legacy stuff, that for me is just such a good move for any kind of role playing game. For those of you who are possibly friends from Germany or people who are aware of it, have you heard of the Dark Eye?
No.
All right, so the Dark Eye is one of those legacy games. It's been going on for years, and a friend of mine has been trying to convince me to play it. It's a great looking game,
Yeah.
and it's one of those ones where you kind of have to be very nervous about it because the lore and the history in the world is so rich because of how many years of materials gone into it that
Mm-hmm.
that it can be very quick to sort of get sort of um, I guess shoehorned or twisted into a point where you're like, no, but that's not right. That's not how this particular law goes. It actually goes like this, and it's fact. You know what I mean? It's like
Oh,
no. It's like saying the Hell Knights were a bunch of paladins and not Hell Knights. It's like no, that's not right. No, they're Hell Knights. They're different. They're lawful, sure, but they're not. Like you get into
yeah.
huge arguments over stuff like that, which I love.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's very cool. It's very cool.
I gotta
Uh,
check that out.
all right. So, I guess that kind of brings up the end of all the topics that I've got right now. But I guess the last thing, and I know I said I was going to do the last thing before, but I love talking to you, Jared, and this is just going to be a lot of fun.
I
I guess
appreciate it.
the other thing I want to ask is, um, what are some of your hopes for the future? Like, let's say that someone from Paizo is watching this video right now, because Eric Mona actually subscribes to my channel. And,
Oh.
Eric, if you're watching this, by the way, I loved your announcements during Gen Con. You're an amazing person. You're a wonderful, cool dude. And I would love to play
Mm-hmm.
games with you because I caught your game as well. And if you are watching it, like, just seriously hit me up. I will legitimately run something and play something with you. But anyways, assume that someone from Paizo is watching. What
Mm-hmm.
are some of the things that you, as someone who has dedicated and loved Pathfinder Second Edition, what are some of the things that you would love to see crop up in Pathfinder Second Edition?
So I think one of my favorite things that came about, and obviously I don't know, but we were speaking about Rise of the Rune Lords, Shattered Star, and Return of the Rune Lords. It was three different games that continued on each other.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to do something like that.
So a
Have see more
saga.
of that, like a saga, an epic saga. Obviously not back to back to back, but like you played this and then they reference it and it has to do with that previous game. I thought that's really cool, and that's something I would like to see is maybe some like a saga. I know they're currently just putting out APs um, that are super interesting, like Age of Ashes, um, and the Extinction Curse, which dealt with the Isle of Kortos, and now they just put out their new AP. the devil's in the details. It's the
Agents
Agents of Edgewatch.
Yep.
And that's all really awesome lore building. It's really awesome. I would love more APs that are sagas. That obviously, they could link anything. They could turn around and be like, this next book has to deal with Agents of Edgewatch. And I could be like, oh man, I did not see that coming. They could do that, and I would love that. And I think that's something I really, really, really want to see more of.
I definitely think that that'll be on the cards. I mean, Jason Borman, who's one of the main guys over at Paizo. I want to say one of the earliest adventures that I played was the Price of Greed trilogy. Even till today, I say that if people are playing any game, even second edition or first edition Pathfinder, to pick up this, it was a 3-part module, so single part modules that led into one another and eventually kind of came to a conclusion. That for me was the first exposure I had to the saga. I mean, there was also things like the Kobold Kings saga as well, and a couple of other little ones here and there. But Rise of the Runelord was the biggest one. So I think more than simply just the saga type of thing is the epic saga, the big one, the one where you're playing over a couple of years. And yeah, I agree. I think that would be absolutely amazing to see. From my end of things, I'm gonna be that guy. I loved the kineticist in first edition. I loved them so much, and it wasn't just the fact that it allowed me to play Avatar: The Last Airbender in a role playing game, but also because my favorite character in the world was a very obscure character from One Piece, who was a swordsman who used gravity.
Oh yeah.
Right? So I built that. I built the blind swordsman as a Tengu with a gravity kineticist focus, and he was deadly, and he was so cool, and everything he did was all about channeling his kinetic energy into his actual sword, and then when he hit people, he could increase their weight and crush them, and then if he wanted to, he could also make things weightless, and then they would just float and levitate. He was just so much fun. I had a great time with him. I really cannot wait till we see either the kineticist or some form of similar kind of elementalist character come into the game. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know we said that we'd do this for 20-30 minutes, but we've doubled that time because it's awesome. So let's wrap off by, of course, finding out where can we find you. What are some of the cool things that you are doing right now as of the making of this video?
Sure. So you can find us on all different podcasts: Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Audible. If you just type in Nothing Ventured, Nothing Gamed podcast, we come up. You could hit us up on Instagram and Twitter at NBNG Podcast. Every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the United States, we go live on Twitch at NBNG. And you'll get to see us live play, or we do conversations like this where we talk about classes. We just did a witch dive. And coming up next year in September, we will be playing Agents of Edgewatch. We're diving headlong.
Wait, sorry. This year or next year?
This year. Sorry, this year.
Good.
This
you
year.
Said next year. I was like, that's planning ahead, maybe. My God.
Sorry. No. Sorry. I apologize for that one. That was my mistake. We're coming up on our 1-year anniversary.
Oh.
So in my head, next year is our physical next year. So yeah, this year, this September 2020, we will start Agents of Edgewatch. We have same crew, changing classes, and we're all super excited about that. I'm excited to play. It looks like a lot of fun. If you've never seen the TV show Brooklyn Nine-Nine, that's kind of how I'm assuming my group is going to play. Think like Police Academy.
Oh yeah.
So that's it. Someone already wants to be the dad of the group, and I was like, all right, man, you do what you got to do. So now I'm going to tell him about your Hell Knight character. Oh yeah. And he's probably going to play that. He's going to steal it. He's going to rip it off of you.
He's more than welcome to. As long as when he does it, he just yells out, "Freeze!" You know, like, doesn't matter the situation. Doesn't matter if it's like everyone's already been arrested and stuff. You know, he just comes out the back. No, that's awesome, dude. That sounds like it's gonna be absolutely amazing. And guys, you can find all of that stuff in the links below. Be sure to go visit them and check them out. Look, I mean, like, I recently have taken to listening to a few podcasts because I have just had a little bit of time, you know, for health reasons and other things, to just be able to sit back and chill and listen to stuff. And yeah, no, the Nothing Ventured, Nothing Gamed guys are a ton of fun. And me and DM Jared might be planning something big. Something big coming up. I won't let anything loose just yet because we're not sure what it'll take to make that happen. But do stay tuned, of course. As you guys know, my name is Michael and I am the Dead Aussie Gamer. This is my channel. This is my face. This is where you can find everything that I do. I also have a Twitch channel. Again, you can go find all those links below. We are back and doing more of these videos. You know, like just advice videos and chat videos. If you want to come and ask for a video, head on over to our Discord channel. There is literally a channel for you guys to ask your questions, and I will make videos about them. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, of course, to my guest, DM Jared. And, of course, guys, from us to you, game hard or die trying. Bye!